Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of the video series on troubleshooting this HP 15 notebook PC that has the CPU frequency locked at 500 megahertz. So this machine, in previous videos, you've seen how the reason why it came to me was because the owner mistakenly had spilt water on the machine, and it definitely messed up the keyboard, and we did have some water on the motherboard, or at least you could tell where there was some water on the motherboard because in the previous video, which I'll put a card in the corner, I tore this thing apart and I cleaned the motherboard down with IPA or isopropyl alcohol, let it sit for a while, put it back together, and it fired up, but we're only running at 500 megahertz CPU frequency. Now I should note that the owner, he said that when the spill first happened, he tried to turn it back on, which is a big no-no. He tried to turn it back on and it didn't turn on. And then he decided to bring it to me, and literally he got it here. He decided to turn it on in front of me, and it started up, but I said let's shut it off because I'm pretty sure that there's probably some damage. Or I told him I said I'm going to tear it apart and inspect it, see if I find any residue, clean the residue off, which I've done that. And I thought everything was good. I had to replace the keyboard because the keyboard was damaged, and I happen to have a compatible replacement keyboard that's kicking around from a different system. But I noticed that this thing is running really slow. And I mean, even slower than what you would expect for the hardware in this thing. It's a Pentium SoC. It's got 4 gigs of RAM. Not very spectacular. But what I'm doing here is I have taken the CMOS battery off. Now I should note, in the previous video, I verified it wasn't a Windows issue by booting into Windows Setup and running Hardware Monitor from Setup to verify that we were still running at 500 megahertz outside of our regular Windows 10 install, and we were still running at 500 megahertz. So next thing I did is I flashed the BIOS with a BIOS update from HP's website. That didn't fix anything. So right now I've just got this battery off here. But another thing I'm going to try is, even though temperatures were not high, I'm still going to go ahead and take this off here, and let's go ahead and reapply some fresh thermal compound to our heat plate. Now I should note, this is what I call a solid state laptop. HP's solid state laptop, where it has no cooling fan, it just has this plate. And I'm just not really a fan of this design. I prefer there will be a fan blowing air across something. I mean, the closest thing I have from a different brand would be the motherboard that's in the TV Box Slim. The living room TV Box Slim, it's an Acer Aspire motherboard from 2015. It's got a Celeron SoC, and it's kind of a similar thing, except it has a fan. Alright, let's go and pull this off here. And let's go ahead and clean up our thermal compound and put some fresh thermal paste on here. So this is the same way you would do it for a regular CPU. Yeah, I was kind of curious if I was going to have a thermal pad in here, or if I was going to have actual thermal compound, and we have paste. So that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and just clean this off here real good. Now, of course, I'll use some rubbing alcohol to really get it clean. Doing this while I'm letting it sit without the CMOS battery. I mean, just trying everything else I can before I condemn this motherboard. And if I condemn it, it's not really going to be worth fixing, in my opinion, because it's not a really spectacular high-end machine by any means. I got an AMD base gateway laptop over here. It's got I think it's an AMD A8 series processor, or APU rather. I think it would offer similar performance, and it's more expandable than this thing. Actually has two SODIMM slots, not one. Actually has a fan on its APU. So, you get the idea. But I do want to try to see if we can save this first. And of course, I'm also cleaning this off. Alright, let me get my thermal paste. Okay, so I have two grades of thermal compound. I have some cheap white based compound. It's actually old Radio Shack heatsink compound, and I mean it works, but for this I'm going to use my better quality stuff. This is Corsair XTM 50 thermal compound. So I'm going to apply some right here. Don't need a whole lot. Now for anything that has an actual exposed die, we want to make sure the entire die is coated. Now we might need a little more. Now some of it's getting picked up on the spreader. For any kind of CPU or chipset or GPU that has an exposed die where the die touches the heatsink directly, you do want to spread the stuff manually to ensure the entire surface is coated. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but you want to get it as good as you can. Now for this little thing, it's not going to be the end of the world if we don't get it exactly perfect, but if you're working with a GPU, especially a hot running GPU, it's critical. Because if you don't, you can have hot spots that may not be registered by the thermal sensor, and you could actually cause damage. Alright, so we'll put this thing back on here. It's kind of a weird setup that they got here, but it's HP, so kind of be expected. Get that screw hole lined up there and get that lined up as good as we can. Now they got numbers on here, so we'll tighten this down in sequence. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to reinstall this screw here. Alright, so I'm going to pop this CMOS battery back in. First I'm going to check its voltage and make sure it's still good. It should be. Yeah, it's perfect. It's 3.2 volts, so that's definitely a full battery. So pop it back in here. And we'll put this back together and hope for the best. Now I'm going to do the reassembly off camera, but if you would like to see the process of tearing this down and putting it back together, please see the card link to the video of me pulling this motherboard out to clean it. Okay, so I don't have it fully reassembled yet. I got it together just enough to test it. So we'll run off of AC power for this. Alright, let's go ahead and start it, see what we get. Let's try to access the SEP utility. Alright, it says the CMOS checksum is invalid. CMOS will be reset to the default configuration and it will be rebooted. Please check your BIOS SEP options to see if they change. Alright, so we'll reboot the system. Let's go into setup. And of course, it has lost the date and time because of being, of course, off the CMOS battery. Let's check the log. So that 2014, I think it was, that we saw earlier, that was probably from when this thing was just first being set up. So what I'm going to do is just make sure a few things are turned on. Let's check our boot options. Okay, so secure boot is on and we are set to UEFI boot. That was what I really wanted to check and verify. We'll just boot this thing to Windows 10 and let Windows 10 set the date and time. See if I notice any difference in performance here. Yeah, based off of how this thing is starting up, I'm going to say we're still running at 500 megahertz. More than likely. Although this is not a really fast laptop, it shouldn't be this slow. You can see again we're capped at 23% CPU utilization. Yep, 500 megahertz. So I'm thinking the motherboard is shot. So I think I've tried pretty much everything I can think to try. We flashed the BIOS. We've let it remain off the CMOS battery for a little while. I've applied fresh thermal compound to the little heat plate just to verify that it's not a thermal issue, and nothing has changed. We're still running at the miserable 500 megahertz. I mean, one thing I could do is I could back up his files and reinstall Windows, but I don't think that's going to do anything. For the simple fact that it was behaving the same way in Windows PE, more or less, in the Windows 10 installer. It took forever for the installer to load. And then, of course, I ran HW Monitor within setup, and it was still running at 500 megahertz. And you can see right now, the CPU is maxed out at 23% exactly. It won't go over 23%. That's as high as it's going to go. So, we have ourselves an Intel Pentium quad-core 500 megahertz CPU with this system. So, obviously, its performance is not going to be satisfactory for the customer. And I've come to the conclusion that more than likely it is, in fact, a damaged motherboard from the water spillage. So, as I said in the previous video where I cleaned the motherboard in this thing, do not delay. Have it fixed as soon as you can. And for crying out loud, don't start your computer after you spill water on it. That's not smart. And I suspect that this damage could have occurred from the customer trying to reboot this machine after spilling water on it. So he said to me that he spilled water on it and it shut off. Alright, okay, don't try to start it back up because you've obviously caused damage to your system. And looks like this laptop is done. And as I think I said in a previous part of this video, I mean, I could look on eBay and look up the price of a motherboard, but I don't know. I'm going to think over my options, and I'll talk with the owner, see what he wants to do. He's really wanting a different computer, to be honest, but if we can fix this one, then, I mean, if he wants a motherboard, then we'll get a motherboard. If I can find one for a decent price. So, anyways, that wraps it up for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video from Kuku channel. If this is your first time, please subscribe to the channel and be sure to tick the bell so we get notified of new video posts. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, leave a comment, and share this video as well as the channel with your friends and get the word out. Also, I have a second channel, that's CubeComp MTDX. Over there you'll find videos about thunderstorms and weather, cycling, and videos about me personally. Feel free to subscribe over there as well if you like. Again, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for your support.